What is a guy who spends all of his time talking to college students or asking people for money to help create more college students? What am I doing here talking about creating a resource revolution? I'm here because I'm going to talk to you about an unlimited resource, the infinite resource, the mind, and how we can bring that to bear on addressing this really sobering problem of natural resources in the 21st century. Andrew, you talked about heretical thinking. You talked about making the big pivot. You talked about innovation. I represent an organization which has been heretical, has been innovative and tried to make the big pivot. We're founded in 1944, but I want to go back a couple of years even before that. And we were founded in a place which would seem very unlikely to produce a great educational institution. We were founded in rural Macon County, Alabama, in the Black Belt, at an institution called Tuskegee Institute. There may be some in that vast world out there who know about Tuskegee, founded by Booker T. Washington in 1881 to educate former slaves. The president at the time in 1930s was a guy named Frederick Douglass Patterson, and he had a big idea. He said in rural Macon County, Alabama, that black people should learn how to fly. And he went to Washington and he petitioned the Department of Defense to allow Tuskegee Institute to get rid of some cotton fields and pave an airstrip and build an aviation program, a commercial aviation program. But by the time he got the ability to do it, the country was about to enter war, and he said, let's make this a defense aviation program. And let's do something really heretical. Let's have African Americans not just fight on land and on sea, but let's have them fight in the air. And that big idea, that heretical idea, that innovative idea, that pivot produced the Tuskegee Airmen, one of the great fighting forces of World War II. 1944, the end of the war. Men and women, African Americans who for the first time had gotten to be involved in the war industries and had fought in the air and on the sea and on land in Europe and in the Southeast Asia, were going to come home, and he said they've got to get an education for the 20th century. And he challenged all of the black college presidents to come together and create a United Negro College fundraising organization to help pay for their educations. He enlisted business, John D. Rockefeller Jr., to lead the first campaign. They raised $750,000 in that first campaign, and they've raised $4.3 billion in the 71 years since then, and helped over 400,000 students get an education, a college education. Now, the big heretical idea was that black people could get college educations and should. And as important as that was in 1944, it is absolutely essential in 2015. Not just that African Americans, but that all people of color, not just that low-income African Americans, but all first-generation Americans and people all around the globe have the opportunity, an equal opportunity, to get the kinds of educations that will make them not just competitive in the workforce in the 21st century, but to help solve the big problems. Because as finite as the resources are, the mind is infinite. And we don't know where the next big idea will come that will solve one of the resource problems that we face in the United States and around the globe. And let me tell you, we've got to do some work there, and the work will be hard because the challenge is immense. Today, in this country alone, we are doing such an unacceptable job producing college-ready high school graduates. And that's why anyone who is concerned about making sure that we have the workforce of the future says, first and foremost, we've got to make sure that our kids get the kind of education which will enable them to get the college education that they need, the advanced skills, the technological know-how that will enable them to be the STEM professionals, science, technology, engineering, math of the 21st century. We can't ration out that knowledge. We've got to make sure that it's expansive. We've got to give equal opportunity to low-income kids, to women, to first-generation college graduates. So that's the new work that UNCF is doing, but we're doing it in the way that we've always done it. We're doing it in partnership with business, and that's why SUEZ has been one of our partners. SUEZ has recognized that for young people who have had no expansive educational opportunities, they've got to come into a business and see that what they learn in the classroom has application in the real world. And that's why we've built a partnership, highly competitive program for our students to intern with SUEZ. And that's an important first step in our partnership, but it's part of a larger effort that has to be undertaken around the country. Because right now, our kids are not college ready. Only 5% of African American kids in this country graduate high school. 5% prepared to take a 4-credit course in math, science, English. Only 5%, 95% don't. 14% of Latinos, 30% of whites, 60% of Asian. We got a lot of catching up to do. It seems a formidable obstacle, one that we cannot achieve. But you know, I come from a community which has taken on formidable obstacles for generations. And so as I sort of pivot to my close on this, I want to say a little bit about the reason to believe. The reason to believe that we can make this revolution. And those starkly disturbing statistics about natural resources, that we can find a way of addressing them. 50 years ago, we had a huge racial divide in this nation. Governor, you remember it. Blacks and whites lived separately and unequally. African Americans aspired in that place where I began my conversation with you about Alabama, with African Americans living in fear of violence, separated, segregated. But within that community, there was an aspiration. Our aspiration to have full citizenship rights. And a new generation of leaders came forward, led by Martin Luther King, by John Lewis, and by nameless people that we don't even know. And they said, we can stand up for our rights. We can challenge something which seems like an intractable obstacle. And we can do this nonviolently, and we can create a revolution. 1965, Selma, Alabama. Seemed like the darkest day of many dark days in a civil rights movement. A group of 300 demonstrators try to cross a bridge, and they're not just stopped, beaten and assaulted. Here, John Lewis, beaten to the ground. Some predicted the end of the civil rights movement, that African Americans would never achieve their citizenship rights. Fast forward 50 years, same bridge, some of the same people, a little older, but led across that bridge by the first African American president of the United States. Selma wasn't the darkest day. It was the beginning, the dawning of a new day. African Americans have their full citizenship rights. This resource revolution is one to create global citizens who recognize that education is essential to prepare all of our people to compete to work to make productive contributions in the 21st century, address human resource issues, and connect them to the natural resource issues that we face as well. Global citizens. That's the revolution that we have to create. A global citizenry that has the skills, has the capability of addressing these big problems, and recognizes our interconnectedness and that we must invest in human resources to get the return that we seek in natural resources. President of the United States closed his remarks in Selma last Saturday with, I think, a fitting quotation to share with you here today. With effort, he said, we can roll back poverty and the roadblocks to opportunity. Americans don't accept a free ride for anyone, nor do we believe in equality of outcomes. But we do expect equal opportunity. And if we really mean it, if we're willing to sacrifice for it, then we can make sure that every child gets an education suitable to this new century. One that expands imaginations and lifts their sights and gives them skills. That's a pivot. That's a heretical idea. And that's what we have to do. And that's why UNCF, in partnership with SUEZ, steps forward to be a part of this resource revolution. Human resource, natural resource. We join with SUEZ in challenging all of us to partner to create better futures for our nation, for the world, for our children, and for the next generations. For 71 years, that's the work that UNCF has done. Our call to action, I think, is a call to action in sympathy with the resource revolution. It is to remind all of us that we must create a world in which young people, all young people, have an equal opportunity to the education that will prepare them for rich and enriched lives. Why? Because a mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in. Thank you.